I have known Cavendish Lawn for nearly 30 years, and in all that time I have seen him make precisely two mistakes of consequence. The first was accepting a posting to the continent when his father died, leaving the estate in the care of a man he had never met, a decision that cost him 3 seasons of mismanagement and a ruinous harvest. The second was what he said to Margaret Fenn on the morning of the 14th of October, in the front hall of Thornvale, with the autumn light coming through the tall windows and every housemaid within earshot. I was there. I had ridden up from London to go over the estate accounts, and I arrived just as Cavendish was conducting what he called a review of the household arrangements. He meant it efficiently. He was, in those days, a man who prized efficiency above almost everything else. What he had not yet understood, and what would take him 5 years and considerable suffering to learn, was that efficiency and worth are not the same thing at all. Margaret Fenn had kept Thornvale running for 3 years. That is the plain fact, and I will state it plainly. When old Arthur Fenn died, the finest estate steward the North Country had seen in a generation, his daughter had stepped quietly into the gap. She was 23 years old. She had grown up in those rooms, had learned the land from her father's knee, and when the tenants came to the door in February with their caps in their hands and nowhere else to turn, she was the one who answered. She negotiated the grain supply. She managed the roof repairs on the east wing. She kept the accounts with a precision that made me, a solicitor of 20 years' standing, feel faintly ashamed of my own handwriting. She had done all of this without a title, without a salary commensurate with the work, and without once asking Cavendish for acknowledgement, because Cavendish had been in Florence and then in Vienna and had communicated by letter roughly once a month, letters that were courteous and entirely useless. When he finally came home that October, I watched him walk through every room with the look of a man taking inventory. He was polite to the staff. He was thorough. And when he reached Margaret, standing in the doorway of the study with the estate ledgers under her arm, he said something I have never quite forgiven him for. "You've done what was needed," he said. "It's been adequate work. But I shall be bringing in a man from Derby who specializes in estate management. You'll understand the position requires proper credentials." Adequate. Margaret did not flinch. I was watching her face, and what I saw there was not grief or anger. It was a brief, perfect stillness, the kind that comes just before a decision is made. Then she set the ledgers on the hall table, smoothed the front of her dress, and curtsied once. "Of course, Your Grace," she said. "I'll have everything in order for him by the end of the week." She was gone by Friday. I tried to speak to Cavendish that evening, to impress upon him what he had done. He listened with the patience of a man who was certain he had not done anything. She was the steward's daughter, he said. She was a temporary arrangement. I told him she was nothing of the sort. He thanked me for my counsel and changed the subject. The man from Derby lasted 11 months before the tenants collectively refused to deal with him. The roof repairs Margaret had commissioned, done properly, the first time, were the only thing standing between the east wing and the rain. The grain contracts she had negotiated ran out the following spring, and the replacements cost 30% more. I wrote Cavendish 3 letters about it. He did not enjoy any of them. In the meantime, Margaret Fenn had not disappeared. That was the thing Cavendish had not anticipated. He had imagined, I think, that she would retreat into some quiet corner of the county and be comfortable and invisible. Instead, Lord Harwick at Ashbourne Park hired her the following spring to oversee a renovation of his home farm that everyone said couldn't be done in under 3 years. She did in 14 months. Word travels in the North Country. By the 2nd year after her departure from Thornvale, she had a small office in the market town of Alderley, a reputation that preceded her by a full county in every direction, and precisely no need of the Duke of Thornvale's opinion. I heard about her progress through mutual acquaintances. I confess I was quietly delighted. Cavendish heard about her too. I know because he stopped mentioning her name entirely, which in my experience is what a man does when a name has begun to sting. The letter came to my London office in the autumn of the 5th year. It was a single page, in Cavendish's careful hand, and it asked me to come to Thornvale at my earliest convenience. I came. The East Wing had a new problem, the foundations this time, not the roof, and the man from Derby's replacement had proven no improvement on the original. The tenants were restless. The harvest had been middling. The house felt, for the first time in the years I had known it, tired. "I need someone who understands this estate," Cavendish said. We were standing in the library. He was looking out the window at the north field, and he did not look at me when he spoke. "I know," I said. "I was wrong," he said, "about Miss Fenn, what I said to her." I waited. With Cavendish, patience is required. "I'd like to speak to her," he said, "if she's willing." "She's an elderly," I said. "Whether she's willing is a matter I can't speak to." He rode to Alderley himself. I know because one of Lord Harwick's men saw him and wrote to me about it with some amusement. Cavendish arrived at her office on a Tuesday morning unannounced, in the rain, which I think is the most honest gesture I have ever heard attributed to him. He had not sent a letter ahead. He had not dispatched a footman. He simply came. I have Margaret's account of what followed from a conversation we had the following spring, when everything had been settled and she was willing to laugh about the early part of it. She was at her desk when he appeared in the doorway. She looked up. She did not stand. She said, "Your Grace, do you have an appointment?" He said no. She said, "I have a meeting at 11. He said, "I know." "I'll be brief." And then he was not brief at all. He stood in the doorway of her small office in Alderley in his wet coat and told her that Thornvale was struggling and that he had been wrong and that the word adequate had haunted him for 5 years and that she deserved to hear him say so directly, without letters or intermediaries, which was why he had come himself in the rain on a Tuesday without warning. Margaret let him finish. Then she said, "Are you offering me a position?" He said, "I'm asking you to come home." There was a silence that, by her description, lasted approximately the length of time it takes to decide something irreversible. "Thornvale was never my home," she said. "My father's home was the steward's cottage at the North Gate. That is a different thing." "Then I'm asking you to make it yours," he said. "I'm asking you to let me make it right. All of it." She told me she had not expected him to say that. She had expected a business proposition, terms, a salary, a title commensurate with the work, all the things that should have been offered 5 years before. She had prepared herself for that conversation, had rehearsed the terms she would name. She was not prepared for a man who had ridden through the rain to stand in her doorway and ask to make something right. She did not say yes that Tuesday. She made him come back on Thursday, having cancelled the 11 o'clock meeting, and she asked him every question she had stored up across 5 years, about the tenants by name, about the East Wing foundations, about what he understood of the estate that he had not understood before. He answered every question without deflection. He had done the work of learning. That, more than the Tuesday visit, was what mattered to her. On Saturday she rode back to Thornvale with him. He had arranged no ceremony of return, no assembled household on the steps, no announcement. She simply walked through the front door and into the study, sat down at the desk she had once vacated, and opened the estate ledgers. She told me afterward that the familiar smell of the room, old paper, beeswax, the particular cold that lives in stone houses in late autumn, made her throat tighten for just a moment. One moment, and then it passed, and she set to work. Cavendish stood in the doorway watching her, and I am told he did not say a word. Some things do not require saying. I attended the wedding the following spring in the small church at the edge of the north field, with the tenants filling the churchyard because there'd not been room for all of them inside. The East Wing was sound by then. The grain contracts were renegotiated. The ledgers were in an order that made my professional heart glad. Cavendish stood at the altar with the look of a man who understood, at last, what he had almost lost, and what it had cost him, and what it was worth, and why a measure of efficiency in the world is a substitute for the kind of woman who sets the ledgers on the table and curtsies once and walks away with everything intact. I have thought often, in the years since, about that morning in the front hall, about how near a proud man can come to losing the one person who holds his whole house together, and never know it until the silence she leaves behind grows too loud to bear. Cavendish learned it. It cost him 5 years and the better part of his pride, and he has told me more than once that he would pay it twice over and count it cheap. Margaret is the Duchess of Thornvale now, the ledgers are still hers, and the tenants still come to her door first. That old, tired, beloved house has not been tired since.